Hey there, welcome to First Look. So I'm recording this in the evening, and this one happens to be the night before the election. We'll talk about that in a minute, but that just gives you a context. So this week we have, it's kind of an in-between week. We're still in the same basic season, but there isn't anything particularly unique attached to it. Because over the last several weeks, we've had kind of a theme to everything. You know, it was World Communion Sunday, it was Stewardship Sunday, Reformation Sunday. This past week, it was All Saints. You know, we've had pledges and things like that. But this is a week that's kind of right before other things. There's on the 17th, we're going to have our PW Thanksgiving week, and then, we're moving into, Thanksgiving, and then it's near the end of the season. Excuse me. And so, we're still kind of grappling with identity. And, let's be honest with ourselves. Politics is a big part of our identity on some level. It may not be for you individually. You may think of yourself as not particularly political, whatever that means. But for just about all of us, on some level, we are engaged in the political process. We vote, we watch the news, we feel exhausted by it. Now, we are kind of to blame for that because I've been to your homes and you've probably heard me talk about it. The news is on a lot. And so it's, we get to this stage and we're kind of exhausted by it. But ignoring it, I think, is also to our folly. And I think one of the things that I've probably said in the past and tend to gravitate towards, I think because it seems nice, is, hey, left or right, this or that, we're all together. We're all like that. And I like the sentiment of that. But I think by and large, we get to that place because we choose to ignore certain things. You have friends, you have family who think very differently than you politically. And you may have grown up in a time that you don't talk about certain things. You don't talk about money, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion. And that keeps things civil. It's too bad, obviously, that having healthy conversations about any of those subjects wouldn't make us better. Because, we tend to only talk with people about those things that we feel like we can, that think the same as us. And, that's part of the disparity. Because we don't really understand each other. We don't really, at the heart, understand each other. Or, I don't know, it's just complicated. So this week, by this Sunday, unless it's very strange, we will know who the next president is. And we'll be dealing with that as a nation in lots of different types of ways. Excuse me. And in the way we deal with it is personal to us. We'll either be hopeful and thoughtful and like, yeah, this is good, or this isn't good. Or something in between. Like we'll want to put it behind us And, I want to talk a little bit about how those feelings, I think, come across. But I want to get to the passage here that we're going to be using for this Sunday. Because, again, we can't really talk about our identity as people of faith without acknowledging the way that we vote, the way that we engage in the political process, how we're affected by it, how we think other people are affected by it, and how our faith plays a role in how we think laws should be made. So that's kind of the backdrop of what we're doing here. So the passage for this week is from Mark chapter 12, verses 38 through 44. So let me read that to you, and then I'll kind of describe what I'm hoping to do with the passage itself. All right. So this Mark 12, 38 through 44. As he taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive their greater condemnation." So he sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. And many rich people put in large sums. And a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." So, I've read that passage many times. You've read that passage many times. And it speaks to devotion. It speaks to, putting everything that you have into something. Her willingness to be faithful despite her financial struggles. And it's also, of course, a critique on the powerful. They're all going to the same synagogue. Some put in this much, she put in everything. And they're all going to leave. And there's something about that system that also needs some reform. And I think that what you see in Jesus' words is that, even their large sum of money isn't that much of a sacrifice to them. But for her, it's everything. And I think that there's a ton of different lessons in this. And again, I haven't thought all this through yet because it's a first look. But I think that as we're thinking through how we approach the political elements of our life, the parts that, affect us locally, roads getting built and stadiums or highways, or how it affects our school systems and, that kind of thing. And then we think about how things affect the state and how things affect the nation and the people in the nation. That how we vote and what we advocate for has an effect on other people, has an effect on us. And I started thinking about that effect because some people will say, listen, no matter who wins, nothing really changes. Well, there's a certain kind of privilege to that. Because as we have seen, laws enacted or non enacted have a great deal of effect on many people's lives. And if you are insulated from that because of your status, if you can, doesn't matter how much you put into the pot, you're still going to be okay, then there's a certain kind of privilege to that. Now, on the other end, there are people who think of themselves as not political at all. Well, I don't really get into that. I don't really think about that. But, you went to school here and you pay taxes here and your children go to school here and you have to drink the water and, your grandchildren have to, experience the climate and, all those things, all the things And there's a kind of a devoid of responsibility if you're not engaged on some level, if you at least don't have well-informed opinions. And, one of the things that they talk about all the time, and actually when I was talking with Humphreys, who, our friend from Malawi, I was talking to him about preaching, what his process is like. And he, excuse me, he said something that, we say here, his schooling taught him the same little idea, that we preach with the Bible in the one hand and a newspaper in the other hand. And I thought that was great because it just means how universal that is. And I thought a lot about that and how he and I must approach that in similar ways, but also very different ways, because there's a lot of crossovers where he lives, but there's probably a lot of very unique things to his context. But we still came away with the same idea that to be a person of faith, to be a preacher, to be a listener of preaching, you have to have some level of engagement in the story. The policies of that synagogue, the policies of that community allowed for this woman to give her last bit of money to the synagogue. And she's applauded for it. Jesus doesn't say, okay, now that she's done that, give her money back, give her a whole bunch of food, and I'll make sure she's healed of anything. That doesn't happen in the story. The story is about her willingness to devote herself to something, despite what we could critique about the system. That she continues to believe in being devoted to something greater than herself. And I think that speaks a lot to this person. And if it speaks to that person, then it should speak to all of us. That we're all willing to kind of take our faith and look at a bigger picture and be able to recognize that what we do and how we profess those political opinions isn't just about what is good for me, but is what I hope is good for other people. If I'm only thinking about, as these individuals in the synagogue do, long prayers and whatever. If all of my devotion and all of my opinions and all of what I think and how I position myself in the world is really just about making my life potentially better or making myself feel stronger, then, I'm missing the mark. But if what I give is to something bigger than myself, because I think that if I devote myself to something like that the world can be better. Because I think that's what she thought. I'm going to devote myself to this and God will bless us because that's what I'm supposed to do. In our discourse, I think should feel like that. It should lead us to say, the people that I want representing me, I think it says something about who I am. Not that we are like our politicians, because that's, maybe a fool's errand. But that I am giving of myself to a process, a system that I hope makes other people's lives better. That I hope inspires people to live well and to feel good about themselves. That is uniting and is comforting and is that gives us a sense of peace and inspiration and pushes us forward, expands our horizons. And that's a lot to hope for, of course, in our political arenas, I understand. But, there have been times when we've allowed ourselves to think like that. And so I guess I'm starting to realize that the goal of church isn't necessarily to be this neutral place where we just hope that everyone there won't say anything about each other's politics because it'll offend someone. But it would be nice if we could talk about it. If we could talk about our those things about ourselves that we believe with a kind of integrity that allowed for genuine understanding of each other. Because I don't think we can avoid it. And I think as polarizing as it can be, I do hope for a time, and that doesn't have to happen with me and you, but I do hope for a time where you can talk to each other about, why are you willing to do this and not this? Why are you willing to accept that but not that? Why are you willing to ignore this but not this? In a way that each person can grow. That in this story, the person who gave a lot and who wanted all the accolades, and the person who gave those coins, my gut says they don't talk to each other. They live in very different worlds. They go to very different synagogues in their minds. There's a disparity there. And, I think that the best of us is that those people would be thinking of her when they went into that synagogue instead of themselves. because she's probably thinking of them in some way. We don't think enough about each other, I think, when it comes to the decisions that we make. We think about how they'll affect us, but not enough about how they'll affect other people. And when they do affect other people, we just sort of chalk that up to some, excuse so that we're not responsible. And I think that's a tough place to be over and over again. And so I was thinking about realizing that I can't solve the political discourse in the United States of America with one sermon or service. I thought about a couple of different ways that I might want to approach the sermon. And I'm still kind of narrowing in on it, but it won't be a regular sermon. Meaning I'm not going to just give a sermon that I hope is that one ignores that we just had an election. Nor am I going to have one where I'm trying to get you to feel a particular thing. I do think that we need to sit with and have some sort of honest internal reflection on why we do what we do, why we vote the way we vote, how we feel about whatever the result was, and just allow sympathy and empathy and mutual respect for each other to just surround us. Because I think we're going to need it. Because I don't know what happens after this election. Do things get really good? Do things get really hard? Are things peaceful? Are things turbulent? I have no idea. But I do know that we're going to need as much kind of centering and anchoring and reflection as we can to do it well. And I'd like to try to offer that space. So this Sunday will be about that. I'm sure at some point we will pray for, someone will offer a prayer for the president-elect. And someone will pray for the division and hardship in our country. And they should. But I need time. I think after all of this, and a lot of my mental energy is spent, pondering all these things. I think I need the space to kind of sit with people I care about and have some time. So that's what I'm planning on doing. So I'm going to use this passage as sort of a way in. I have some other resources and things sort of I'm thinking through for this week, and we'll see where that goes. So hopefully, however you need to approach it, you'll approach it. And we'll go from there. And I also hope that however you're feeling after the election, wonderful, not so wonderful, concerned, whatever that means, I really do hope, because this is literally what I'm here for, that you can be someone regardless of whose name you checked on the box, that you can say, I need to kind of talk to you about where I'm at. And know that I don't have to interject myself into that. I just will hear you and care about you and listen to you and hopefully learn something. So I hope that if you feel that way, that you'll ask and we'll talk, because I care about you. And then we'll do the best we can. So I hope that you are well. I hope that you get what you need this week, physically, emotionally, as we kind of work through this time. Thank you for surviving my dry cough. Thank you for being you. Thanks for the ways that you're thoughtful with each other. And I'll see you next time for another First Look. So until then, take care.